2020's The Last of Us Part 2 is a sequel to the widely successful The Last of Us, released in 2013. This action-adventure game, developed by Naughty Dog and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, acts as the natural stepping stone of Ellie's story. The game follows both Ellie and Abby as our interchangeable protagonist and antagonist throughout the 20 to 25 hour story's runtime, thrusting each of the two characters into their own unique story arcs. Throughout this video essay, I shall highlight why The Last of Us Part 2 has formed an overwhelming relationship with myself and drawn me to play the game time and time again. I shall be doing so through the concept of identification with characters and Carl Jung's archetype of the shadow, through the lens of violence and its unique appeal towards myself. Identification of characters. Identification refers to the mechanism through which audience members experience and interpret the text from the inside, as if the events were happening to them. In turn, this leads to players who identify with video game characters to experience social reality from another perspective, to help shape and reinforce their self-identity and social attitudes. This can be realised either via acknowledging a character's positive attitudes and beliefs, or in the case of The Last of Us Part 2, experiencing the pain and suffering a character such as Ellie had to endure. In any game we play, identification requires that we forget ourselves and become the other, that we assume for ourselves the identity of the target of our identification. As Cohen puts it, the more involved we are with the fictional world and what happens to the people in it, the more likely we are to enjoy being entertained. If the character's psyche, decision-making and overall attitude towards themselves and others weren't compelling, my immediate attraction towards the game would have diminished, and to accomplish the game's overall story would have ultimately felt lackluster and without meaning. The narrative storytelling, character development, and world building within The Last of Us Part 2 crafted an experience that had me in one clearly defined state of mind at the beginning of the game, and a completely changed and realised one at the end. This feeling was something that no game, film, or any other media source had me experience at this level ever before, directly as a result of identification. When playing as Ellie, I am transported into that character's position and immersed in the world that that character inhabits, becoming enveloped, supporting, and wholeheartedly agreeing with the choices she's making and the actions she's taking. This often leads me to acknowledge Ellie's story's positive and negative aspects, but understand and support her choices, having wholly identified with the character. This attachment to the character often leads to the mistakes she makes and small victories she earns to feel like my own and not some byproduct of the game's linear events. This heightened identification enhances the degree to which my own attention is captured by the game, as a result also heightening my connection to the flow state, pulling me deeper and deeper into the outstanding craftsmanship of this game as a whole. Juxtaposing this concept, when playing as Abby for the first time, my sense of identification and flow collapsed. The developer's ambitious decision to play someone who was initially depicted as the antagonist of Ellie's story had me and many others actively attempting to kill Abby or disrupt the flow of play, disregarding much of what the character and her party had to say. Cohen states that identifying with a character means feeling an affinity towards that character that is so strong that we come to the empathetic understanding of the feelings that character experiences and his or her motives and goals. While my affiliation towards Abby was initially contradictory to Cohen's statement, it didn't take long for me to find aspects of her life that I could emphasize with, acknowledging why she killed Joel and noticing many of the same admirable aspects in her that I found in Ellie. Coincidentally, this led me to neither support Ellie or Abby more than the other, reacquiring my sense of flow and formulating a play experience that I'd never experienced before, ultimately coming to identify with the two opposing and confronting sides of the same coin. The Shadow. The Shadow refers to one of Jung's greatest contributions to psychology, which he adapted early on in the 20th century from Freud's original division between the light and dark sides of the human psyche. The Shadow comprises repressed ideas, weaknesses, desires, instincts, and shortcomings within the unconscious mind. Within the context of The Last of Us Part 2, the Shadow is directly manifested via the violent imagery, actions, and choices I experience, awakening an attitude and thought structure that contradicts that of the natural world, which is naturally both thrilling and exciting for me. According to Jung, when the Shadow is activated, usually through projection, it is charged with effect, and takes on an autonomous life of its own, beyond the ego's control. While this concept may be inherently negative outside the play-space confines within The Last of Us Part 2, I'm not thinking about the confronting imagery or morally questionable actions I'm partaking in. I'm simply experiencing. Watching an enemy die during a cutscene, activating kill animations during takedowns, shooting someone's head off, or planning and setting up a series of traps to dispatch my enemy are, while typically quite gruesome, are still novel experiences within the gaming world. For myself, the violent video game is a safe, private laboratory where I can experience different emotions, including those that are controversial in the ordinary life. This attitude towards The Last of Us Part 2 fuels my Shadow to take part in actions I wouldn't even consider during day-to-day life, and considerably enhance my enjoyment with the game. The appeal of The Last of Us Part 2 is due in part to its ability to provide me with a novel experience that lets me try on ideal aspects of myself that I might not find expression in everyday life. This directly supports the Shadow's personification of everything that I refuse to acknowledge about myself and yet is always present. This harmonious relationship between violence and the shadow, when done correctly, can cultivate an experience that doesn't simply serve violence for the sake of violence, but instead serves to reinforce a strong narrative, engages player, and act as an outlet to express the other side of myself. As Jung says, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Overall, The Last of Us Part 2's impressive storytelling, ability to create a character that I could identify with, in conjunction with formulating a play experience that awakened my shadow, solidified its experience as unlike one I had never experienced before, and one I don't believe I will experience again for a long time.